Good afternoon. National Assembly of Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon questions the First Minister, and question 1 is Nick Ramsey.
Diolch. Will the First Minister provide an update on the Welsh Government's policies for improving the M4?
Yes, as well as our long-term plans for the M4 corridor around Newport, we're carrying out a number of measures along the M4 elsewhere to increase capacity and tackle pinch points.
Thank you, First Minister. There are, as you will be aware, increasing concerns from all sides about the Government's proposed black route solution to the problems of the M4 in South East Wales surrounding the Brynglas tunnels, and indeed the process which led to the black route's adoption as the Government's preferred route. Aside from the environmental concerns, the Commissioners of Newport Docks have said that the bridges over the docks pose a serious threat to the economic well-being of the port of Newport. Will you now listen to the Welsh Conservative calls for you to reopen the consultation process around the M4 solution and to put the blue route well and truly on the table for consideration during this hiatus which your failure to act over the last few years has created over next year?
Does anyone follow Twitter, I wonder, on the benches opposite? Because William Graham, you see, said that he supported the black route, at which point Antoinette Sandbach responded, "Pity William Graham was not willing to put his vote where his principles allegedly are. I was taught that actions speak louder than words. What price principles?" she continued. "Public inquiry excludes blue route. Whole point of the motion is to get that position reviewed." But Byron Davies joined in then on Twitter. He joined in saying that if there was to be a relief road, it didn't have to be a motorway. William Graham responded saying it should be a motorway, at which point Byron Davies said to William Graham, "Could this be a spoof account? Could this be a spoof account?" William Graham, I know so well, voted in favour of the Welsh Conservative motion yesterday. William Graham replied, "No conflict between motion and black route. Confident black route will be chosen at public inquiry." Response from Byron Davies, confirmed definitely a spoof account. William Graham later confirmed that his tweets were genuine. Sometimes I refer to the party opposite. I should refer to the parties opposite. They don't have a single view on the M4, a single view on transport, a single view on the economy, a rudderless shambles.
David Rees.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you actually identified the M4 has pinch points elsewhere, and clearly the overhead section of Port Talbot is one of those pinch points. And the trial at Junction 41 has been operating now for 6 months. Will you look at that trial, actually come to a point where we want to cease it, look at the operation of the overhead average speed cameras to assess their effectiveness in the pinch point, and then take a decision based upon the whole range of outcomes. But the people of Port Talbot have actually suffered congestion at pinch points along the roads in Port Talbot itself, and traders have informed me they've lost business. Is it now time to actually say time is up on that trial?
Well, I can assure the member the trial will operate until March. The effect of the peak time closure will need to be reviewed before taking a decision on the way forward. Public consultation will take place as part of any plans, if there are plans, for permanent closure. The effect of the average speed camera enforcement will be assessed using data collected from the eastbound carriageway, because there are no junction closures on the westbound carriageway, and that trial is being monitored. All these things will be taken into account before the next steps are considered.
Rhywun ap Iorwerth.
Diolch.
Thank you, Presiding Officer.
£1 billion as a shorthand for the cost of the new black route. There's a suggestion that already that price has maybe gone up to £1.2 billion. Would the First Minister also comment on suggestions that a bridge over Newport Docks would cost another £200 to £300 million on top of that, compared incidentally with about £100 million for a third crossing across the Menai, which is going to be highly unlikely, I guess, with £1.5 billion spent on that stretch of road in Newport?
Well, he's pulling figures from thin air, I have to say. I mean, it's not even £1 billion, it's well below that. We've always said very clearly that we would not seek to use the full amount that we were able to borrow to pay entirely for one road project. That's been made very, very clear. The reality is that something must be done to alleviate congestion around Newport. We have made our proposal, and now, of course, that proposal is being examined through the various processes. But it's not good enough to say that nothing should happen, because the traffic will continue to build.
Diolch, Llywydd.
First Minister, one way of improving traffic flow on the M4 is, of course, to encourage people to travel in other ways. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if you can tell us when the proposed introduction of a direct rail service between Ebbw Vale and Newport will begin.
that's not going to affect the tunnels. The traffic coming through the tunnels comes from the Severn Bridge going westbound. Whether there is a railway line between Newport and Ebbw Vale isn't going to make a difference. The traffic doesn't travel through the tunnels that go to between Ebbw Vale and Newport. Much of the traffic that comes through is coming through on a weekend. They're travellers going, holiday makers, particularly in the summer. They are going to use their cars. They're not going to go onto the trains because of quite often the luggage they're carrying. The reality is that the situation is not going to be alleviated. There needs to be something done to make sure that the traffic continues to flow so that people aren't sitting in traffic jams, with, of course, the effect on the environment through extra CO2 emissions.
Before we move to question 2, I'm sure the members would like to join me in welcoming a delegation from the Fijian Parliament, led by the Speaker. And I did assure them that you were very well behaved, so hope you're not going to let me down. Now move to question 2, Roger Glyn Thomas.
Will the First Minister make a statement on local government reorganisation? Well, later today, the Minister for Public Services will be making a statement on the latest Reforming Local Government White Paper. Well, that's extremely interesting, First Minister. May I remind you of what you said on the 28th of January of last year in presenting the Williams Commission report, which you said that we must move as a matter of urgency on this issue, and we will be consulting internally, and we as a government will be able to state our official position once we have completed that consultation at the end of March. A year later, we haven't the slightest idea where the Welsh Government stands. Following that, you've asked councils to come forward with proposals for voluntary merger. You've turned those down, and now the Minister for Public Services to make another statement. You're all over the place on this issue, First Minister. We don't have the slightest idea where you stand on this issue, and more importantly, you haven't the slightest idea where your government stands on this.
Well, I know knowing where your party were to stand would be a bit of a help. I've invited the other parties. No, it's not enough to say that you have no policy. Listen, I want to ensure that there is an opportunity for the leaders to speak to myself and to each other to come to a conclusion about what the map should look like. If there is no agreement on that, a map will be published in the summer.
We've seen 2 local government reorganisations when lines of a map have overridden the importance of service delivery. Will there be a published cost-benefit analysis prior to any local authority merger, or will there be an internal rate of return based upon net present values prior to any merger?
Well, there will, of course, be a draft regulatory impact assessment which will accompany any proposals for a bill, and they will, of course, contain the figures in terms of the costs of such an action.
Jana Finch-Saunders.
Thank you. First Minister, last week the Minister for Public Services, Minister number 3, sent shockwaves across not only those authorities whose bids had failed, but the wider local government community in Wales. And now, despite previous commitment to the Williams recommendations, last week's action certainly contradicted this, and that left those authorities feeling actually that feeling that they'd completely been misled by the Minister and this Welsh Government. Now, this was, as you can well imagine, this was against a very tight financial, challenging sort of settlement and a tight, challenging backdrop. Yes. With such uncertainty, turmoil and demoralisation in our very important level of governance here in Wales, it is time now for you to step up to the plate as the First Minister and tell us, what is your blue plan for the blueprint for local government? And also, are you still committed? Are you still committed to the Williams recommendations, or do you have a bigger plan for a much smaller number of authorities in line with other members within your own cabinet?
We are still considering what the map should look like, but I mean, what she's suggesting is that the proposals that came forward from the council should have been rubber stamped, regardless of any wider context. And the reality is, of course, that only one of the proposals was actually in line with the Williams Commission's recommendations in any event. So clearly, that couldn't. There were difficulties with doing that. I say once again, there is an open invitation to the other party leaders to take this forward. I prefer to take it forward on a basis of more than one party taking it forward. We know that it was always impossible to bring forward legislation before the election in 2016, and so instead of shouting, come forward with some constructive proposals.
I knew I made a mistake telling the Speaker from Fiji you were well behaved. We now move to leaders from the questions of the party leaders. First this afternoon, we have the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, you're very keen to tell us that you're leader of Welsh Labour. Are you leader of a cult-like mafia that is frightened of free speech and terrified of dissenting voices?
No, I leave him to judge that. He's in a better position than me.
Obviously, your former employee, Councillor Luke Ellis, seems to think that you are, given his writings and comments over the last couple of days, in that he has highlighted the fact that, you know, Labour today is more like a cult-like mafia and is frightened of free speech and terrified of dissenting voices. Now, I remember full well that when we just talked about the Williams Commission last year, you were confident that you would carry your party and you would have a quick decision. Now, what we have 12 months later, First Minister, are two parts of your party refusing to select AMs, Cyflwynir and Is-deitlau. We have councillors walking out in Wrexham. We have a public service minister who is ripping up the work of his predecessors. And we have a First Minister who is setting no direction at all for local government reorganisation. When are we going to have a roadmap for what local government is going to look like from your leaderless government?
Can I advise the Leader of the Opposition to be very careful in terms of quoting Luke Ellis? I give you that very strong advice at this stage, given the things that you may not know. I leave it there. Secondly, he talks about leaderlessness. This is a party whose members tweet publicly against each other while he sits there and does nothing. Absolutely nothing. Let them do it. Let them do it. And he accuses our party of being leaderless. The reality is we are in a situation where we have outlined now the way forward in terms of local government in Wales. There is a white paper, there is a statement this afternoon, and the Minister will make clear the future direction of local government for Wales.
First Minister, whilst you're very familiar with quoting about Twitter, I concentrate on the real issues that people want to focus on, which is what the local government footmap will look like around Wales. And ultimately, what people want to know, and in fairness, well, the Public Service Minister can giggle and laugh, but all he seems to do is go around causing mayhem like he did in education with very little results. What the Public Service Minister should concentrate on is supporting councillors in their role, and in particular communities getting the services they require in their everyday lives. Now, last week we saw from him complete disregard for all the work that has gone on in the last 12 months. I just don't think it's unreasonable, and many other people don't think it's unreasonable, to see a clear set of principles coming from the government as to what we can expect around local government reorganisation. Now, you've talked of a map coming forward this summer. Is that map going to actually come down to 6 local authorities, as has been talked of by the Public Service Minister, or is it going to stick to the Williams Commission principles and we're going to see 12 or 13? Can you give us that simple geographical context that the Welsh Government is working to?
I don't believe 13 was a figure in the Williams Commission's proposals, but I'm not going to prejudge discussions that I have with other party leaders. That would be discourteous, and I'm not prepared to do that. But he mentions education. He's run from that, obviously, this afternoon, despite the fact running a press conference on this. Run from the fact that his party in England have failed to build any new schools. Run from the fact that they have got rid of the EMA. Run from the fact that they've trebled nearly the amount of money that students in Wales would pay in the future if they had their way. Run from the fact that education spending in Wales is 8% higher than it is in England. Run from that. Run from any kind of policy decision. Run from the fact that his Prime Minister yesterday trailed the suggestion that schools funding would be ring-fenced in England and then rolled back from it. And worst of all, in a press release the Conservatives sent out only this afternoon, accused the Labour government of gerrymandering exam results. Every single young person in Wales who's tried an exam in the past year or two has had that qualification undermined. What kind of a party undermines Welsh students to please their masters in London? The party opposite.
Cult-like mafia.
I think you said that 6 times.
I was hoping you'd pick up on it. It's ex-employee.
Order. Right, we now move to the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. As you know, First Minister, Plaid Cymru has produced detailed, costed proposals that are achievable to employ and train an additional 1,000 doctors for the Welsh NHS. According to Welsh Government estimates, can you tell us how many additional doctors Wales needs?
Well, we know that we have, for example, 11% more GPs that have been put in place over the past decade. We know that vacancies are low. We know that there are difficulties in recruiting doctors in some specialisms. That much is right. It would help me, for example, if you were to explain how the recruitment of 1,000 doctors is achievable and where they come from.
We've produced detailed proposals on this. There is a paper available. We have plans to recruit doctors in the short term and train them over the long term. First Minister, surely we can all agree that a shortage of GPs, especially in the valleys and in rural communities, is a ticking time bomb, with so many people due to retire. Now, the number of doctors that we have needs to be addressed now so that we have a new generation of GPs able to meet patients' needs. You announced proposals last week to introduce 1,000 additional medical staff into the Welsh NHS. Can you tell us how many of those would be doctors?
There will be doctors, nurses, OTs, there will be physiotherapists, there will be people who are at the front line of healthcare. Because we know those figures are achievable. What we don't know, and this mythical paper, which I haven't seen, I have to say, is where are you going to get 1,000 doctors in 5 years? You can't train them in 5 years, because it takes more than 5 years to train the doctors. That's out of the window, you know that. You would apparently recruit 1,000 extra doctors. I mean, the ambition's fine, I'm not going to argue about that, but where on earth would you recruit 1,000 extra doctors in 5 years? There is no country on the planet that would do that.
You deliberately misunderstand our policy, First Minister. Our plans include a short-term measure to recruit doctors now and a longer-term plan over 2 terms of a Plaid Cymru government to train additional doctors for the Welsh NHS. And we propose 1,000 doctors because that's how many doctors we need to bring Wales up to the UK average. That's a reasonable first step as part of a long-term plan for the Welsh NHS. Now, it's concerning to me that you can't specify how many additional doctors the Welsh NHS needs as part of your proposals. It also concerns me that you've linked your proposals to Whitehall's introducing a mansion tax. Now, you've previously said to us in this chamber, what happens in Westminster happens in Westminster. So where is your plan to train the additional doctors that we need now, irrespective of Whitehall's tax policies?
We do not know we know now it's 2 terms apparently, that's news to us, but there we are. We do not know how many extra doctors you plan to train. We do not know which specialisms you say you would put the doctors in. Well, it's not my policy to recruit 1,000 more doctors. It's perfectly proper for the people of Wales to try to understand where these doctors would come from. I make the point to you, what you suggest is impossible. And any doctor will tell you that. Which is why I say the ambition might be fine, but the reality is you've not thought through the policy. And you accuse us, frankly, if we get extra money from London, we'll take it. We're not like you and say we don't want it, we want independence instead. And we're not in the business of saying we will base the recruitment of 1,000 doctors on making sure that people carry on drinking sugary drinks in order to pay for those doctors. It's a fallacy in terms of the way that you're trying to present the argument. The reality is we have increased the number of doctors, particularly GPs. It's not just about doctors, it's about nurses, it's about OTs, it's about physiotherapists, it's about speech and language therapists as well. You have no plans to recruit with regard to them. So I'm afraid she and I will never see eye to eye on this one clearly. We know what is realistic. We have been recruiting, not the pie in the sky of Plaid.
We now move to the Leader of the Welsh Labour Democrats, Casey Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I note with interest the proposals from the Public Service Minister to limit councillor terms and terms for cabinet members and leaders. I presume what is good for the goose is also good for the gander. So can I assume that should those powers be devolved to the National Assembly, you will be introducing term limits for Assembly members, cabinet members and indeed First Ministers?
I'm afraid I can't change an electoral system to make sure the Lib Dems win an election. No, on that basis. I'm afraid you'll have to do that yourselves. The local government minister, the Minister of Public Services, will of course outline his proposals in the course of this afternoon's proceedings.
First Minister, you, not surprisingly, didn't answer the question. If it's good enough for the goose, surely it's good enough for the gander. And will your government be bringing forward proposals to limit the terms of individual Assembly members, cabinet members and leaders? Now, I appreciate that Leighton Andrews obviously has a very low opinion of his Labour colleagues in local government, and this is your way of breaking up Labour's old boy clubs and their cosy cabals. But don't you agree that the real way to empower voters is not for the minister to dictate who can and cannot stand in elections, but to abolish safe seats, party fiefdoms and unopposed council elections by introducing a fair voting system so people get the representatives they vote for?
Well, a voting system of the kind, not the exact kind, but a voting system of the kind was put to the people of Britain. They rejected it overwhelmingly. In a referendum, I don't think that that would gain support. I think people do very much value the fact that they have a local council law or council laws that represent their area. And as she is fond of saying to us in terms of health service targets, try and win in the existing system before trying to change it for your advantage.
But, Minister, you're not going to allow local people to vote for the councillors that they want to, because you're going to limit who can stand in elections. You're taking power away from the people, taking power away from them to elect the people they want to represent them. Now, isn't it the case that the Williams Commission was a real missed opportunity to examine in detail what we want county halls to deliver? Now, your minister will go on to say in his statement this afternoon that you're going to tell local councils what to do in education, social services, economic development, waste, planning. After you take all those things away from local people, what exactly do you expect local government to do?
Well, that's nonsense, I have to say, in terms of taking powers away. I've said many times that when we get the structure of local government right, we can then look at devolving powers to local government. But it's important that those councils are able to use those powers, and bluntly, some of them are not able to use those powers at this moment in time. But I have to say that, first of all, we don't have the powers to change the electoral system of the Assembly, which comes as news to me. And secondly, I do not think it is right to say to people, you will not have a councillor representing you in your local area. It is not right to say that STV has to be imposed on councils without, of course, there being support amongst the public, and I do not believe that support is there.
Stand who can't.
We now move to question 3 on the paper, and that's Mark Isherwood.
Will the First Minister detail how the Welsh Government complies with the Freedom of Information Act 2000?
We comply with the Act itself, and the guidance from the Information Commissioner's Office, of course, is a part of what we consider.
Well, thank you. Well, for the second time, the Welsh Government has been taken to the Information Rights Tribunal in the Llangollen River Lodge case, and for the second time, the Welsh Government has lost. Your Welsh Government classed the request for information from Edwina Hart to or from Jane Hutt as vexatious, but despite appointing top London barristers at huge public cost, the tribunal found that in all the circumstances the request was not vexatious. We already know from previous documentation obtained that the Welsh Government did apply inappropriate political pressure on the Health Board to locate a health centre in a completely inappropriate place. What else are you trying to cover up?
So we know the Conservatives are against the health centre in Llangollen. That's what he's just said. So we will note that one. I mean, the allegations are made of nonsense, of course. And can I remind him of this, that of the requests that we receive, only 0.2% of those requests end up with information being released despite our original position. 0.2%, 9, actually. And I have to say that in terms of compliance, our rate is better than the UK government, far better than Northern Ireland, and streets better than Scotland. So when it comes to compliance and considering Freedom of Information Act requests, we are in a very good place. There will be occasions, of course, occasions such as this, where, despite the Information Commissioner agreeing with us, the Tribunal did not agree. And that is something, of course, that happens from time to time in government.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, having a look over the FOI responses made by your government this year, I noticed that one made in January regarding Neath Port Talbot's bid under the 21st Century Schools programme was made exempt from disclosure because, and I quote, it would or would be likely to inhibit the free and frank exchange of views for the purposes of deliberation and would otherwise prejudice or would be likely otherwise to prejudice the effective conduct of public affairs. Now, I don't expect you to reply directly about this because obviously it was rejected as an FOI, but I'm interested to know how you balance such decisions against the need for transparent government. Would it not be possible for you to release some of that information but with redactions so that the public could see some of what the discussions were as opposed to not having any of that information at all?
The assumption will always be that information is released, and where possible, information released with redactions. Each individual case is considered on its merits according to examining that case against what the law says and what the guidance says. And of course, if people are not content with that, there is an avenue open to, or avenues open to them to take their grievance further.
Question 4, Jeff Cuthbert.
Llywydd, First Minister, will you make a statement on Welsh Government actions to support strong inter-community relations in Wales?
Yes, we published a National Community Cohesion Delivery Plan in June of last year, and that plan is supported by 8 regional community cohesion coordinators, and the Minister will be publishing a progress report in the summer.
Thank you for that response, First Minister. Last month, of course, we witnessed the horrific events in Paris, where a number of people were brutally murdered by extremist fundamentalists who perverted the name of one of the world's greatest and most historic religions. Nonetheless, I was heartened by the show of solidarity here on the steps of the Senedd a few days later, when people from different faiths and backgrounds across Wales came together to condemn extremism and terrorism of all kinds. We saw a show of solidarity from leading members of Wales's Muslim and Jewish communities. Would you therefore agree with me, First Minister, that the vigil held here in Cardiff Bay demonstrates the importance of strong interfaith relations in Wales, and something that we should use as a basis to help build community cohesion, particularly during times of tension?
Absolutely, and of course that cohesion is continued in the work of the Faith Communities Forum, a very useful forum, of course, for ensuring that issues of policy are aired, but also, of course, to bring people together at a time when the world is experiencing so much strife. So what we saw on the steps of the Senedd is an illustration of a process of cohesion that continues on a monthly basis through the Faith Communities Forum and through other means as well.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Madam Presiding Officer, First Minister, Professor Anthony Glees of Buckingham University warned recently that Islamic State, IS so-called in the word, has people who go around schools, campuses, and Islamic community centers looking for young people who may be susceptible to radicalization. Given the strong inter-community relations are vital in identifying and stopping these recruiters for terrorism, what further measures will the Welsh Government take to strengthen relations with the Islamic community in Wales?
Well, I think the relations are already very, very good. The fact that the community is represented on the Faith Communities Forum, it's a very civically active community. And of course, where there are difficulties that arise from time to time, we work very closely with the community to overcome those difficulties. With regard to security issues, those are matters primarily that are not devolved, but of course, we work with the UK authorities in order to make sure that any potential trouble, any potential recruitment is discovered as quickly as possible.
Lindsay Whittle.
Minister, there are concerns that arise from permanent residents of an area where there are gypsy travellers present. Quite often the response from the authorities and from some permanent residents is antipathy from the outset, and this is obviously not desirable. Concern you have to recognise from both sides when these issues do arise are indeed valid. How are you fostering understanding and dialogue between residents and traveller communities to encourage both sides to listen and to reduce tensions?
Well, it's the job of the community cohesion coordinators in order to do that. They'll play a key role in enhancing engagement with gypsy and traveller communities in order to build that mutual understanding, of course, and in order to build mutual respect across communities. So that is a role that they will play in order to overcome the difficulties that often arise when different communities come into verbal conflict.
Question 5, William Powell.
Diolch, Llywydd. What assessment has the First Minister made of the contribution of the young farmers movement in Wales to the communities of rural Wales?
It's the largest rural youth organisation in Wales, 155 local clubs, over 5,000 members, and has always played a valuable role within rural communities and in working alongside government.
I'd like to thank the First Minister for that response and for that endorsement of the important work of young farmers in Wales. One particularly important aspect is the level of volunteering that young farmers clubs nurture, and there are on average 8 volunteers that support each club, averaging some 6 hours per week, equating to almost 500,000 volunteer hours per year. And the recent loss by the young farmers of 3-year funding of some £700,000 from the National Voluntary Youth Organisations Fund threatens, many argue, the sustainability and the future prospects for the young farmers continuing their valuable work. In this context, First Minister, what assessment have you made of the potential threat to the future of young farmers in Wales that's brought by this funding reduction?
Well, I know that there is a meeting planned between young farmers, I believe, the Minister, in the course of the next few days, or at least with officials. And in that meeting, it'll be possible then for the young farmers' clubs to receive feedback in terms of their financial position.
Paul Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, it's more important than ever that there is a secure future for young farmers' clubs in Wales so that they can support and continue to develop the skills of young people across our rural communities. And I echo the views of others who have criticised this reduction in funding from your government. Now, bearing in mind the importance of young farmers' clubs for our young people, particularly in rural areas, what particular or specific discussions have you had with the organisation as to how they can continue to provide important services for young people? And what other alternative funding sources can the Welsh Government make available to the young farmers' clubs to help them continue to provide their services to young people?
Well, this, of course, will be discussed in any meeting that will take place, but the members said that this was a ministerial decision. Well, this isn't quite right, because it was an advisory panel that made recommendations to the minister, and the panel decided that of the organisations that had submitted a bid, 7 should be funded, and it includes people such as Gobaith Cymru, Scouts Wales, Boys and Girls Club. So who does he think should be knocked off that list so that the funding is given to the young farmers clubs? That's the problem. He's saying that the young farmers clubs should be given special treatment, and I don't believe that's fair when you look at the other organisations that have been funded. Having said that, of course, there is an opportunity for them to speak to officials that they can receive more advice on the way forward.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Of course, half the problem is that such a significant organisation, you've acknowledged yourself the role that they play, particularly in the most peripheral communities of Wales where there are no alternative services for young people. Part of the problem is that they have to go year on year from one bid for funding to another. Now, will you look at a model of a relationship between yourselves and the young farmers that treats them more as a delivery partner? It's a model used in New Zealand, for example, where the government sees the organisation as a means to promote government programmes among the agricultural community, to introduce educational and training programmes, to go into schools, to actually talk about the source of their food and so on and so forth. And can we turn this unfortunate position into an opportunity in order to ensure that there is a stronger relationship between the government and the young farmers in terms of delivery, and that is based on agreements and contracts that are far more sustainable in the long term rather than going year on year?
Well, in principle, of course, that would be fine, but in reality, that's not the position we as a government are in. We don't know how much long-term funding we will receive from the United Kingdom government, so it's very difficult to give some kind of a long-term commitment without knowing our own financial position. But that's something that has been raised a number of times by a number of organisations, whether it would be possible to have a long-term agreement, but it's very difficult when you look at the relationship between the governments.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I declare an interest. Two of my daughters are members of the Young Farmers Club. First Minister, it's clear now that there's no point revisiting the decision by Leslie Griffiths' department for additional funding for young farmers. But your government constantly tells us that the Rural Development Fund is bigger than it has ever been in Wales. And would you agree with me? There is potential for both Rebecca Evans and Carl Sargent to look to utilise some of the funding from the Rural Development Plan to fund the Young Farmers Club movement, especially with regards, as you've just said, they are key partners in working with the Welsh Government. Young farmers' representatives are on many of the stakeholder groups and are expected to contribute to part of the policy-making role that you yourself as a government. So would you agree with me the Rural Development Fund does offer a brighter future for the Young Farmers Club movement?
Well, it is right that the Rural Development Plan will offer more money than ever before, thanks to the hard work of Labour ministers, both behind me. That much is true. Well, in terms of what the future holds for them, there is a meeting on the 5th of February, forgive me, with senior officials rather than with the Minister. And at that meeting, it'll be possible then to examine what other options might be available to the YFC in terms of future funding.
Question 6, Alan Fred Jones.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the educational attainment of children in Wales?
Well, this has been a very positive story for Wales over the past couple of years, especially the final performance results in 2014. The final examination results demonstrate real progress and improved performance.
Of the pupil in Wales who qualify for free school lunches and achieve 5 GCSEs, 28% of those pupils actually succeed, according to that measure in Wales. In England, the figure is some 38%. Now, after 15 years of Labour education ministers and an anti-poverty strategy, which has been a priority here in Wales, why do the figures compare so poorly?
Well, the figures are more positive. We know from the figures published last week that the level is rising, and we wish to see schools challenge Wales making a difference over the next few years, and also the pupil deprivation grant, which has been given by the government with the support of the Liberal Democrats.
Chapman.
Thank you. First Minister, at the end of January, Estyn announced the Gwyn Education Centre in Glencoch in my constituency had made sufficient progress to be removed from the list of pupil referral units requiring significant improvement. Will you join with me in applauding the work of the whole school community in achieving this result? And can you also ensure that any best practice from Gwyn is shared with other schools in this much needed sector so that they can deliver the best for their pupils?
Could I join the member in paying tribute to the work of the Gwyn Education Centre? It shows what can be achieved with strong leadership and a shared commitment. I understand that Dr Alec Clark, who is the executive head teacher at Gwyn, will share his vision and ideas for improving pupil referral units at the National Conference, which will be hosted by the Welsh Government at the end of this month.
Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the answer you gave to Alan Fred Jones on attainment levels was an interesting spin, but completely inaccurate. Children here are still 50% less likely, if they're on free school meals, to achieve 5 good GCSEs. In England, the Prime Minister is travelling the length and breadth of that country, challenging mediocrity in education. Here in Wales, on the back of a Sunday Times article, the Welsh Government has bunkered down and thrown up the drawbridges and tried to slam the lid shut on debate. First Minister, when will you challenge mediocrity in education? When will you agree that these children don't have a right, it's our duty to provide a good education to them? And when will you restore education to the centre of our nation?
Well, let's just examine one thing. We have protected school spending, ring-fenced it. The party opposite won't do it. Won't do it. In fact, their policy is to cut education spending by between 12 and 20%, according to who you believe. Their own leader on the 18th, not this leader, but the one previous, on the 18th of November, said that the budget that he would put forward would mean cuts in education of around 20% in education budget. That's what he said. That was then supported on the same day by a member on the benches opposite saying, yes, the figure might be 20% as the leader has identified. Andrew R.T. Davis was the name of that person who said that. 20% figure on the 18th of November 2010. The reality is the Tories are all over the place. They want to cut school spending. They want to cut the money to teachers, want to cut the money to students. They can't be bothered to build new schools. We've seen that in England. And we know that education in England is a complete and utter shambles, whereas in Wales it's improving. No cuts of 20% will come from the party on these benches while we're in government.
Anne Jones?
Yes, well, thank you, Presiding Officer. And continuing on that theme, I do believe that the Tory war on Wales is continuing on now on the education system. Well, and it seems, I'm not reading, don't be so stupid. And it seems that, First Minister, that Nicky Morgan, the Education Secretary, is now coming to the thinking of Welsh Labour by wanting to protect school budgets, which was in contrast, as you've just mentioned, to the 20% that the Tories were thinking of cutting should they have ever got into power here. First Minister, will you continue to support the children, particularly those that I represent in the Vale of Clwyd from disadvantaged families that are now enjoying from you an increased budget in their schools, and that we look to help them to attain what they want to achieve, which may not be 5 good GCSEs, although that's what they should aim for, but whatever they get in the way of a qualification, if they get a good rounded education, that should be sufficient for everybody.
Well, we know the levels of attainment in Wales are increasing in almost every way. They're going backwards in England, particularly with regard to GCSE results. I mean, yeah, Michael Gove and organisation don't go together, do they, as two words. And we've seen the fragmentation of education in England, the cuts. It's so bad in England that the Department for Education can't even produce figures to show how much money it spends on education. That's how bad it is in England. It's become so opaque. We know from the Treasury's own figures that we spend 8% more on education than is the case in England. We know we kept the education maintenance allowance. We know that the party opposite would impose a tuition fees tax, would take tuition fees up to £9,000 a year for Welsh students, while of course hammering those at the lower end of the income scale through removing the education maintenance allowance. They cannot get away from the fact that they wish to cut education spending by 20% or 12%, according to which figure they want to come up with today, and that means fewer teachers, fewer opportunities for Welsh pupils, and of course ensuring that the education system in Wales collapses. That will not happen under us, and that's why we have ring-fenced school spending in Wales. It's a shame that the parties opposite can't do the same.
Question 7, Aled Roberts.
Diolch, Llywydd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister provide an update on how the Welsh Government monitors workforce planning in the NHS in Wales?
Well, under the NHS planning framework, all health boards and trust in Wales are required to complete integrated medium-term plans on an annual basis, and these plans must evidence full consideration of how the workforce necessary to deliver a sustainable service will be maintained and developed.
Can I ask you, therefore, if you're confident that that process is proceeding? The figures that we've obtained from the Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board, for example, demonstrate that they spend £5.75 million, or they have done over 11 months last year until the end of November, on agency nurses. Now, simultaneously, they declare that they are unable to open wards in hospital to respond to increased demands for beds because of the failure of their recruitment policies. And do those plans take into account the fact that from next year onwards, any nurse from out with Europe, and Betsy Cadwaladr has many from the Philippines and other similar places, if they don't earn more than £36,000 per annum, they will have to return to their countries of origin, and the health service won't have the right to employ them. So do those plans take account of the numbers in North Wales who are from those backgrounds into account?
Well, first of all, of course, anything appertaining to admission into this country is to do with the United Kingdom government, rather than ourselves, but we must ensure that there aren't any stupid policies in place to stop people from coming into Wales and the United Kingdom to use their skills. But it's true to say that the number of temporary nurses in Wales has actually increased. There's 63% more than there were 4 years ago now. And we know that Betsy Cadwaladr have been recruiting out in Spain, and they've also been recruiting locally and at nursing fairs, and also they have been advertising in newspapers in order to ensure that there's additional recruitment. So they're very active in ensuring that there will be more nurses available in future in Betsy Cadwaladr, but of course nobody knows what the impact of any United Kingdom government policy would be about cutting back on the numbers coming in future.
Of course, it's not just nurses that have issues in terms of ensuring there are sufficient nurses for the Welsh NHS. We also heard at the Health and Social Care Committee last week that the provision of training places for doctors is a problem in Wales, and that has resulted in a crisis as far as doctor recruitment is concerned in the country. And the Deanery, the Welsh Deanery, told us that they have recommended over a number of years an increase in the training places for doctors, up to 200 or so, around the 200 figure, from the current 136 on a number of occasions to the Welsh Government, and their recommendations have not been acted upon. Can you give us an explanation as to why that is the case?
We have made a pledge that we will recruit 1,000 health professionals off the back of the mansion tax, which his party opposes, of course, a redistributive tax that would make money available in order to train more health professionals in Wales. He cannot, on the one hand, say he opposes the mansion tax and then demand we recruit more health professionals when we have said we will use the receipts of that tax in order to attract more health, to train more health professionals in Wales. It's a shame that his party cannot support that revenue source in order to provide the people of Wales with more health professionals.
Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, there is one thing that our parties agree on, that we need at least 1,000 additional professionals in the health service over the next decade. We're clear that 1,000 of those should be doctors, and you're not sure how many of them should be doctors. Now, today, the Health Service Confederation published their briefing on workforce planning for the NHS in Wales, and it states clearly that if training for GPs continues at the current level, then it militates entirely against care away from hospitals and care in the community. So can you at least give us a figure today as to how many additional GPs are required in the health service over the next decade to meet the requirements of the Confederation, the NHS Confederation?
Well, two things. It depends on how many will retire, and it also depends on how many use their GPs rather than visiting the pharmacist or the nurse. We know there is a challenge to recruit more staff in North West Wales in particular, and we will be considering that through our current recruitment programmes. We know that it's important to train more GPs and doctors generally, but what I would say to you as a party is, if you wish to recruit 1,000, we won't go over the old ground again. Well, how many of those would be GPs and how many would be working in the orthopaedic world? I don't believe that you know that, because you've just got one round figure, but there you go. I know you don't have a figure, you've said that, but that might be part of the debate over the ensuing months.
To item 2, which is a business statement, and I call on the Minister.